Hi everybody, I hope you're doing fine wherever you are. This is Bambino here, and on CCR TV, we are literally starting a brand new chapter. We're going to start turning the pages on a lovely program. It's called the Thesis, and I'm happy that it's going to be starting off with a very special guest that I have in the studios today. And we shall be going through the PhD or a doctorate on this program that's called the Thesis, that is awarded. It's called the highest award that's given to a doctorate that's given to in the field of academics. It can be just about any field on the globe, either sports, academics. It can be literature, economics, just about anything. And of course, that's followed by a little study. And for many of us, probably it is something. Dotor. And sometimes we think, okay, is he going to heal us? Is she going to heal us? So with keeping that in mind, we are going to go through what a PhD is when you undergo or undertake a course of studies. And who better than to explain it than Dr. Laila Maria Mascarenhas, who is here with us, who our first guest on the show, my first guest on the show.
Hi, Bambino.
First of all, you tell our viewers about the PhD that you have. It's something different that you had. The different worldviews about children's literature, right?
Yes.
So how you came about that, and thought of that first of all.
Okay. To start off, my parents' homes were full of storybooks, full of books. And I spent my childhood reading stories. Mm-hmm. Those were the happiest memories of growing up, reading stories, sharing books with the neighbors. Then after, I was actually a science student. I did 11th and 12th in science. And then I just happened to go to Carmel College for some work. And there was this entrance test for literature. So on a whim, I answered the entrance test because I come from a literature family. And that's how I landed up doing literature. So I did my bachelor's, then master's in literature. And I would have continued into PhD because that's what my father had said. You'll finish your PhD. Mm-hmm. He told
Talking about your parents, were they also like teachers, professors?
Both of them were academics.
Okay.
My mother, Mira Mascarenhas, she was doing her PhD right till the day, she fell ill and she passed away. And my siblings, everybody, it was just a taken for granted thing that you would first finish your studies.
Right.
Okay. But after finishing my MA, due to financial reasons, I had to take up a job. So then there was marriage and children. So there was a long break from studying. Of course, when you're teaching, I used to teach part-time at that time and raising the children. You are always in touch with your field, but you never get a chance to kind of delve into it in the depth that you do when you're doing a PhD. So after the children were reasonably big, that's a good 17 years later,
you literally did your MA and MA as well.
MA, and we have only 4 children, but...
I like how you say we have only 4 children, yes.
Yes.
In nowadays, it's like,
I know, and people grumble so much about raising children, but raising children is fun. I enjoyed those years with them because they are my textbooks.
Right.
And they've taught me more than the books can teach you, okay? So being a stay-at-home mom and working part-time was just the right balance. You could go out, put lipstick, take a few lectures, but then you come home and you're there with your children. So, okay, this was around 2008 when my husband and I, we decided, okay, chalo, this was this long, this desire that was there in my heart to finish this PhD. let's do PhD. You don't teach or anything, you work on a PhD.
So this was, you completed your MA in which?
1992.
Okay, so from 92 to 2008.
Yes.
That's like 17 years.
Absolutely. And most people feel that, you're so out of touch that you'll never get back. But because I was teaching part-time, I was in touch, but not in touch with the field which I dived into. Now, because I was raising these 4 children, we had a lot of books for the children. And the children used to read the books and movies, and I was much in touch with children's literature. And I realized that children's literature is a field of study, but it has never been studied in Goa University.
Oh.
Okay? So the idea of a PhD is to study something nobody else has studied.
So you got your idea right from the kids, right?
Right from the kids. So I approached the Department of English and I said, how about doing thesis in children's literature? Because people around the globe are doing thesis in children's literature. So they said, come up with a research proposal. So, okay, that was Jan 2009, came up with a research proposal. This is what I intend to study. And in many ways, I was naive. I didn't realize that this field is an ocean. When you read stories, you think it is like kids stuff. So like Enid Blyton, those lovely picnics, and they would have ginger beer and sandwiches and go off on adventures. Okay, so Enid Blyton, maybe you could study that. Then maybe the Tintin comics. We were brought up with a lot of Western literature. And that was there in our school libraries, etc. Okay. So getting into it seemed, okay, this seems very manageable and I'll manage it. I'll finish it in a couple of years, say 3-4 years. But I realized once you get into it,
it's an ocean.
It's an ocean.
Yeah. I can, in fact, fathom by what's coming up with, because when Layla came to the studios, she came with a big bag of many books, and I only had these many books with me. So
these books are actually all the books that I went through, So when you study, you go through so many books.
Was it a weighted subject? I mean, did it weigh?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, that is one of the criteria of doing a PhD. You must do it in something that you enjoy. Should not be something that somebody else has, charted out for you, because essentially it's a solo journey. So I'll just maybe take a parallel from, say, mountaineering. Okay, you decide which mountain you're going to climb.
Right.
And you're the best person to prepare for it. Now, why do you need a guide? Now, a guide is generally somebody who has done some work in that area. So my guide, that's Dr. Rafael Fernandez, he had done his research in the theatre in Goa, and his work is actually pioneering in that area. So logically, as a student, I should have followed up from there. He had done his research from this year to this year, so I should have followed up from beyond that, or taken up a specific theatrist and studied his work. That would have been the most logical thing to do. But I don't have that kind of passion and exposure to the theatre as I had to children's literature. And he was game to guide on this topic.
Right.
So, chalo, we said we'll both work on something that we've never seen before.
But I'd like to interrupt you, since you're saying you've never worked before, but you had 17 years of experience, bringing up your four children. I'm sure that must have been a very strong foundation for you.
Absolutely.
I mean, apart from the foundation you had as a kid, growing up, reading, you're going through your MA.
You're absolutely right. In fact, it is because of those long hours of, reading to the children, buying books for them, trying to select things that would not have biases in them, because as you read and you encounter literature, you find that there's so many biases that you don't want your children to pick up.
Yeah.
Yes. So the interpreting stories for them appropriately, like, okay, see, you know, this is how women are being portrayed in this story. This is not how women should be treated, etc. Okay.
Right.
So that, it was 17 years of being in touch with literature, with children's literature. That was actually the reason why I kind of, you know, dived into this area.
Right. So after getting into this area of, okay, you said, okay, I'm going to do my PhD, you know, how, I wouldn't say easy was it. You've already said it was like an ocean for you you realize. But how, you know, the difficulties that you came apart. Books were available, of course, at that time. And I think by 2010-12, the internet was kind of open to everybody, I think, especially for you to go through your research.
You're right. The internet was the main boon because, for one, the Goa University Library didn't have any books on children's literature. Okay. The reason being, it's a new area. It had not been explored in Goa University. So the internet, but the Goa University has subscriptions to journals from which you can study secondary literature. That is the work that people have done on children's literature. So I was able to download journal articles and things like that by using the university access. Okay. Now, the internet was a real boon because you can access books from around the world, and Google Books, specifically Google Books, gives you a preview of a book. So perhaps you can read the introduction of it, and if it happens to be in the area that you're working at, you can actually request the library to buy it, or you can buy it yourself and things like that. So Google Books was a great help in, so the internet kind of opened up where I could find my resources. Yes.
That's nice. Let's just quickly go back to your school days. Some of your favorite school books, or you know, books that you used to read. Enid Blyton, of course, would be.
Yes, of course. Enid Blyton was staple food, and we read and reread those books. And my friend and I, we used to actually plan who would be which character, who would be which character, and we would kind of, you know, have little games around those books. But surprisingly, I never did a single chapter on Enid Blyton, because after doing research on her, there is plenty of research already done on her, and it was a bit, I wouldn't say inane, but I would say it was not interesting enough for a deeper dive in the areas that I was looking for. Now, what I realized is that, just to perhaps explain the title, different worldviews in children's literature. See, a worldview is the way we look at the world and decide, okay, this is right and this is wrong, and this is how I should behave and this is how I should not behave. So you could have a religious worldview. So that could be, say, like, for example, we are Christian. So we'll have a Christian worldview. So you look at it, okay, this is right and that is wrong, your 10 commandments, etc. Then you have the Hindu worldview. Okay, so many companions are Hindus. And my first exposure to the Hindu worldview from a philosophical angle was through a set of comic books. So the Amar Chitra Katha comic books was a terrific discovery, where I realized that a lot of concepts of Hinduism are very well explained in this. Then from there, I realized, now this is looking back at my own reading and looking at what the children were consuming and reading, that you'll have something like the Tintin comics. Like, for example, let me take just one of these Tintin comic books from here. So the Castafiore Emerald, okay, was one of the favorites of my cousins, and there's no God in these books. So there is a particular way of looking at life in these books, which is different from, say, the Amar Chitra Katha comics, your, say, Bible stories and things like that. So I came up with this hypothesis that children's literature is not devoid of values embedded in them. So we think they're very, very simple and very innocent, but actually they can be used as propaganda, and they are also an embedding of what adults think children should be learning. Yeah. So that's what the whole study was about. And you have a kind of a hunch. You say, okay, I guess that it is this way. Let me find out if it is that way.
Yeah. It's interesting because you must have also found and learned many new things after you looked at books in from a different angle, especially when you were working on your thesis. Coming to the point when probably somebody who is as naive and not knowing exactly what a PhD, how to go about that, if I may kind of just change direction a little bit and say, okay, I've done my bachelor's, I've done my master's, maybe in chemistry, and now I want to do a PhD. So what would be the first step that somebody has to? I think nowadays you need to clear your set and net as well. You need to.
If you've cleared your net and set, then it's easier. Otherwise, you have to answer an exam, and the rules keep changing, but you have to answer some entrance exam. If you've cleared net, set, and you already are up.
You have a.
In the running. So.
And then you decide to on your topic. You need to get your topic.
Yes.
Or you find.
See, there's a lot of things that are involved in doing a PhD. Actually, right now the problem is finding a guide. Guides are too busy. So they don't really have...
You mean there are less guides?
Yes, there are less guides and there are more students. Then there's also a mismatch of guide and what you're interested in. So you may be interested in, let's to give you an example, say Shakespeare, and your guide may not have the least interest in Shakespeare. So to find a match between your guide and so getting a guide is step number one, and that itself is a blessing. And that's right now. But when I started off, it was not as bad. The guides did have some slots available with them. And I was the first student of Raphael sir. So it was a maiden venture for both guide and for student.
Just like we are on a little maiden journey here on CCR TV.
CCR TV on this.
So I hope you're enjoying this little part of the thesis. This is, of course, going to be a series of interviews of finding different people in different fields who have done their thesis and become doctors, so to say. Talking about now, since you've already completed your PhD, so can you be a guide to somebody who wants to probably pursue their PhD?
I suppose there are some rules of the university wherein you kind of have to, I have not really read up what the rules are, but they have certain criteria. So if I fulfill that, I suppose I could be a guide.
Yeah, because I'm sure there are many who would be interested. This is because books, especially story books for children, it's so vast. I mean, you can think about another angle for books and decide to do a PhD in that.
Yes.
I'm sure it's going to be like a little stream that leads into an ocean.
To answer your previous question, actually, you had asked me about now if you have done your master's in chemistry, how to go about it. So, let me use from literature since I'm more familiar with literature. So, a student wants to do something in children's literature, for example. Okay, so he can take a book, say a whole series of books. So this is now the Tintin series. So there are 23 Tintin comics in this. So he can study these books from different angles. For one, there is the text. Okay, so the text has the kind of paper it is printed on, then who the publishers are, on the whole thing of distribution. How did these books from Europe land up in India? So the whole distribution network. So he can study up all of that. Then he can study the author. Okay, what was the author like? And then he can study the people who read the books. So I would divide it into three areas. So you have the author as one. He can study the author. Then he can study the hard copy, the actual text. And he can study the people who read
it,
as well as the whole process of production and distribution. Now, That in itself, if nobody else has done it, is a generation of knowledge. So when you're doing a bachelor's and you're doing your master's, you're studying what somebody else has generated. So let us just say in your bachelor's, you're learning the basic sciences since you're a science student. Master's, you're learning how things operate. But when you're doing a PhD, you're learning why things operate the way they do. Okay, so the kind of the philosophy behind it, perhaps that's why it's called a doctor in philosophy.
Yeah.
So you're trying to figure out the whys of things. Now let me give you a social science example. Now you are involved with weddings in Goa, right?
Right.
People spend a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yes.
It's still the trend.
Still the trend.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example of two brothers. One brother was working abroad and he was making a lot of money. And he celebrated his wedding in real great style. He spent a lot of money. And both he and his wife were earning well. But his brother, who lived in Goa, had a very small-time job. His wife had a small-time job. And they celebrated their wedding at the same scale as the older brother.
Okay.
Now, to do that, they took terrific loans. Now, that was not an isolated case. I'm pretty sure you've seen people who can't afford it celebrate things with
with grandeur, because it's basically trying to, say, okay, it's like, living up to the Joneses, like how they say.
So you've given one answer.
So, yeah.
To start a PhD, you always ask why. You ask, why did the second brother take a loan that he will take 10-15 years to pay just to have a wedding? So all questions start with a why, like why do people do things they do in terms of social sciences. So in your sciences, perhaps you will study, there is malaria in this area. So why is malaria endemic in this area? What are the kind of mosquitoes and things like that. So then you will do a detailed study. So the essential idea is that you study an area that nobody else has studied and then you write a report. So perhaps now this whole book of so many pages with the bibliography and all, it is almost 300 pages book, is a report of all that I have studied. Now, this goes out into the public domain. It's available on the internet. You just have to Google it, different worldviews in children's literature, and you get the whole book. So it is a report of a journey that I have made alone. Of course, the guide gives you little pointers. Hey, you're going off track here and all that. But essentially, it's a solo journey. Now, in Masters, I have studied what somebody else has already done. Bachelor's, school, this is the first time I have studied something that nobody else has studied, and I write my report and give it. So it is called generation of knowledge, which I think is what is the need of the hour. Otherwise, you're studying the same old things what people have done before.
Yeah. And by studying, you also open up a different perspective, different avenues for others as well to study, because they say, oh, we can do this, study in this.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So much so that since children's literature is underexplored, I would say if any literature student wants to do a PhD, this is an area where there is a lot of resources in terms of material to study. So my last chapter is on a DreamWorks movie. Okay, it's called The Prince of Egypt. Now, DreamWorks, everyone is familiar with Kung Fu Panda, Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon. If you're a literature student, you don't just study books. You also study films which are considered a text. Right. So there is so much that people can study. They don't have to go back and tread the old things of studying the old writers that are famous. There is so much happening that they can study now.
That's correct. So when you say, I want to start off and do a PhD, you have a guide. Is there like a time frame given to you to complete it? Or you can do it at leisure?
No. There is a definite time frame. The time frame is 6 years max, and you're supposed to aim for 4 years.
Okay.
So you finish off your PhD in 4 years. For that, you have to have no extra time to be able to do this kind of work. So the best time to do a PhD, of course, is immediately after your MA. So you finished your MA and you're hopefully not yet married, and you are set aside to do your studies. So when you can do a PhD full time, you can actually finish the core work in a couple of years. So 2 or 3 years, you finished your core work and then you write up the thesis. So the actual data collection and things like that you do in the earlier. Now, I was right in the middle of a full-time job towards the end of my thesis. It was like a 9-to-5 job, raising a family plus writing up this thesis. And I realized how much time is needed and you can't squeeze that out of anywhere. So you need, number one is family support. Your family has to kind of set you aside and say, okay, we'll take charge of the cooking, or this social function you need not attend, we'll just go for it. Because it's a tremendous investment of time.
But I'm sure the pleasure that you get out after that, that you've achieved, the goal that you had set for yourself is like undescribable, I think.
Yes, there is a deep satisfaction for finishing what you set out to do. But I feel the greatest satisfaction is like opening doors to other students. It's like, hey, this is like I've done this exploration. I was the Christopher Columbus, and there is a lot more that you can discover in this country. So please go here and visit it yourselves. So if, a student comes to me and asks, how should I go about children's literature? Since I've been there, I can tell them, okay, this country, you will find a lot of interesting things. You go here and you go there.
Super. So, any plans of a double doctor?
No. PhD is a very hard thing, but right now I plan on publishing work. And now take, for example, say, like I've done a lot of work on, say, these Amachitrakatha comics, and they are a publishing house that is constantly publishing. So the work that I did in 2015 when I finished, from 2015 to now, 7 years, there's been a lot more that has been published. So I can work on the newer things that they've published and then write reports on what I find out. So getting that published in journals and things like that.
Okay. So would you say now that you've completed your PhD, your kids have grown up, what gave you like ultimate satisfaction, like, the kids or the PhD?
Definitely the kids.
Yeah.
The PhD was just something that, was an unfinished dream. Like, it's like, you feel you're not educated if you have set yourself a target. This is what I want to do, and I've never been able to do it. So that was like, I wanted to do it, and now the PhD can go back into the cupboard kind of thing.
Okay.
But raising the children was the best experience of my life.
Yeah. And since you said, you have only 4.
Yes.
Yeah. I think after you have 2 kids, then it doesn't matter how many you have after that.
That's an interesting idea that is there in Indian culture. In fact, the eldest is a boy and the second is a girl. So
they say normally full stop.
Yeah, the whole culture is like you have your perfect family. Why would you have more children? But having my other 2 children, the dynamics in the home is wonderful, because I remember we lived in a colony where there were about some 30-40 kids, and half the time the neighborhood was in my house, because there were always so many children in our house, and they were lone kids in their houses, so they used to come to play with my kids.
And they had, and since you have 4 kids, so it was like a 4 generations. I mean, kind of, different age groups. So that they had
Yes,
kids from
yes,
all ages
from
who
all.
who
It was
were
a
friends
very
together.
interesting time. I enjoyed every moment, and you get to know your children on a personal level, which you don't get to know when you come back tired from work and just have to feed them and put them to sleep. Here they come up with interesting little wisecracks, and like you can write a book about their interesting stories.
Right. So
Yes.
are you going to do that?
Perhaps because I'm a creative writer too, so maybe some of the real stories I can put that.
Maybe probably I've given you some food for thought.
Food for thought.
To write a book
Yes, Bambino.
on that. So Laila, coming back to your thesis, this 300 odd page book that you have, different worldviews of children's literature. In a nutshell, if you have to tell us about, and I think because many a times, many of us who've done their doctorates, I'm sure they've spent, like you said, 4 years or 6 years maybe in working to getting your doctorate and completing a dream that many of us have. And after it's done, it's probably kept in the showcase. A few family, probably, your close family know about it. So this is also this show, the thesis is also to kind of bring out what many of us have the time that we have gone through the time. So if you can also explain and tell us in a gist about your book.
The whole
your whole
thesis.
the whole thesis.
Sure. So the first chapter is about what is children's literature. So most people would think that children's literature is just the books that children read. But when you get into studying children's literature, you realize that the concept of a child is 400 years old. That the whole idea of children as a separate entity compared to adults is just from the Renaissance. So any material that is targeted specifically to them could be called children's literature. So like today we'll have the producers of books that target certain books for certain age groups, like say from when they are to be read to, then when they're toddlers, then when they, according to ages, and then you have young adult literature, etc. So according to age groups, let's see. But what if there was literature that everybody consumed irrespective of whether you were a child or an adult? And the best stories are myths and legends which the whole family used to consume sitting around the fireside, and you'd have somebody come and recount the story. So those stories are not specifically targeted at children, because the idea of children as being young and innocent and having to be protected from all the dangers of the world was not there at that time. They heard all the gory stories. So in many ways, the Amarchita Katha comic series, the ones which I was talking about, they have very realistic stories which are not really designed for a children's audience. I may say that because you have a lot of treachery, you have betrayal, you have murders and inverted commas, gory things happening, people stabbing each other behind the back, which if you actually went to look at it, you would avoid telling our innocent kids. Now, in today's day and age, you have the internet, and if your child has access to the internet, they are going to access whatever they can access. So we as parents set boundaries of what they could read or could not read. So that's what the first chapter deals with, that adults were the gatekeepers. So they said, okay, you can read this and you cannot read that. Right. Now, of course, with the internet, children read and watch what they want if they have that kind of access. Then the next chapter, I actually studied the children's Bible stories. So this was the children's Bible in 365 stories. But now, how do you choose a text? Okay, so first what I did is I got hold of a whole lot of Bibles. This one, that one, set them, read all of them and tried to see if any one of them had a very organized worldview. One of the first things I realized is that we say the children's Bible, the Bible for children. Okay, this you easily get this in St. Paul's. You can get this in St. Paul's. They're not Bibles. They are Bible stories. And after searching for a long time, I found that there was this only one Bible which actually has like a proper adult Bible text like this.
Okay.
This is called the International Children's Bible, and it's not available in Goa. I had to get it online. Another thing which I discovered is that all our so-called children's Bibles are based on Protestant Bibles. So the Protestant Bibles have only 66 books, and our Catholic Bibles have 73 books. So many important stories were missing. So now, when I did all this research, then I quickly started writing it down. Okay, this is what I found, and then I found. Then I found one very interesting practice in Goa. When there is a first Holy Communion, people normally give a gift of a Bible.
Right.
Okay? So there was this kid, I had attended her party, and she got a stack of 15 Bibles for her party. And she was dismayed, like, 15 Bibles, what am I going to do with it? Okay? So I studied the cultural dimension of why there is this kind of a product of a Bible in the market, even in Goa. And do the kids read the Bibles? So I had to find kids who read the Bibles to be able to find out what they remember from the story. So it's called reader response. What did you find out when you read? So to find that out, I had to go to catechism groups. So that was my second chapter. So since children's Bibles have a very defined worldview, like, that God is in charge and all's right with the world. That's their worldview. So I went to this, as I said, the Hindu mythology to find out whether there was the same kind of a coherent pattern over there. And the whole series of Amachitra Katha comics is more than 455 comics at that time when I was doing it. Now there are more. And I realized that I spent 2 full years only researching those comics. There was just no time to read anything else because there were so many books.
Right.
So then there is like a book like this. You get these hard copy books. Then you have stories like this. Just reading the text to try and see. I was lucky I found a book, the classic popular. I met the author for a conference and she has studied the Amachitra Katha books. So you read secondary literature on it, you find out what other people have said, and then I realized the gap in literature is what you're supposed to write about. So she has said some things, Deepa Srinivas has said something else, the other writers has, so I can't say the same thing. At most I can quote them, but I have to offer something new. So I realized that none of them had really, worked on how you teach religious values through comics. And I know from friends of mine in America that the comics are used to teach religion over there in America. So I worked with some friends from there, how they use, what they use, and explored how you can teach concepts of dharma, karma, reincarnation, so many concepts. Okay. Then from there, I switched to the secular worldview. Secular as in, I would say it in a simple layman's term, as God doesn't really matter. I mean, it is other values that matter. So what is the worldview there? What really matters? So for example, for Tintin, it's like a Boy Scout kind of say. He champions the weak. And rationalism and science. So those were the values that were highlighted in the Tintin comics. Okay. So again, go through those 23. So for that, I had to visit a lot of libraries, and some students were very nice. They lent me their books, and it's like, the whole community say, "Are Baba Puta, you finish your PhD. Take these books, take and read and finish your PhD." Like everybody was so supportive. That was the most interesting part about doing this work.
And I'm sure when you were doing your PhD, the books that you had were also helpful for your children. They probably had. A lot of reading.
Not really. They had already
The
grown
Tintin.
past that
Tintin
stage.
stage.
Yeah. They had grown past that stage. So then finally, I went to this movie, as I said, this DreamWorks movie, which for me was, I would say, the pièce de résistance, because it is a movie, The Prince of Egypt, is about Moses. But it is told in a secular fashion, wherein if you are a normal viewer from anywhere in the world, the hero is Moses. The hero is not God. So in my last chapter, what I worked out is that, okay, this is what the biblical Moses was. So the biblical Moses was an instrument in the hand of God. So the actor was God. So just like in the Bhagavad Gita also, they had the same idea, which I brought out in my thesis also, is that you are the actor and God is the doer. Okay? So here in the original Bible, you'll have Moses is just the one being used by God. But not in the DreamWorks edition. In the DreamWorks thing, he changes the whole, I say he, because I see one creative head as the main, the idea behind it, the brain behind it. And he changes the focus of it. So you have Moses who liberates them. So it starts off with, terrific exploitation. And anyone in the world can identify with exploitation. So he becomes the liberator from exploitation. And at the end of the movie, again, the shot is of Moses as the liberator. So that's what I brought out in the thesis. Yes.
And I'm sure it's also would be lovely to read it. I think it's available online, right? Your thesis?
Yes, easily. You just have to Google it, different worldviews in children's literature. And if you put .pdf, you get the full
PDF.
You get the full
Fantastic.
PDF.
So we have lots of food for thought.
Yes.
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 Fantastic. So it's been a pleasure, Laila, having you on this premiere show where we, like I said, we were both little guinea pigs. I hope we kind of were good for our audience as well, wherever you're going to watch it from. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the very best. Since you said you're not going to do another doctorate, maybe now we can take all your books and start reading them, and you can do something else.
Sure.
So to all those of you, wherever you all are, in case you all are interested in, of course, pursuing your studies, after 17 years, like Dr. Layla did her MA in 1992 and then decided to do her doctorate in 2009 and completed it. So there's never a time, or should we say a full stop for learning. I think it's throughout your life you can. So in whatever sphere of life you are, and I'm sure you're a good kind of an example to many who would be watching this.
Thank you, Bambino.
Yes.
That was nice.
My pleasure indeed.
Yes.
So we'll be continuing in our series of the thesis. We're going to have many more guests on the show, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot and know a little bit more about them as well. So thank you for joining us on this first episode, and take good care of yourselves.
Yes.
See you.
Thank you.